I'm Rick Miller, and this is
Xing the Gap,
a podcast hosted by a Gen Xer, me, as I try to bridge some gaps of understanding between a baby boomer and a millennial. My two guests today are Shella and Sébastien Heins. Sébastien is the son of his Jamaican-born mother, Shella, and his German father, John, who met in Toronto in the 1970s while attending Ontario College of Art and Design. Sébastien was kind enough to share his story from my play Boom X, and he became the character of Brandon. But here, Sébastien and Shella share stories about Bohemian Toronto in the 70s, getting pregnant in Paris, internalized bias, furniture as family history, hitchhiking, couch surfing, and sharing a joint with Bob Marley. No more waiting in vain.
Xing the Gap.
Sébastien and Shella, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Can you share a little elevator pitch about who you are?
Sure. My name is Sébastien Heins. I go by he, him pronouns. I'm the Associate Artistic Director of Outside the March Theatre Company. We're an immersive, site-specific theatre company based in Toronto.
And Shella?
I'm Shella Heins. I am the very proud mother or parent of Sébastien Heins. I currently do a lot of very interesting things, but basically I'm a real estate salesperson, among many other things.
Conversation.
I don't follow you on social media, Sébastien, because I don't spend much time on social media. I guess I'm one of those people who is becoming a little more skeptical about it. But I ask either of you, are you involved in social media? And do you see a real difference in how your two generations approach social media and that kind of communication?
I'd say there's a major difference. I'm still extremely anxious, nervous around it. Sébastien seems extremely relaxed.
I'm Rick. I think you and I have something in common that you don't know. I've actually largely stepped away from social media since about a month or two into the pandemic. So just to give some background, I used to be quite active on a couple of social media platforms, especially Facebook. The theater industry uses it a lot to get the word out about shows, to learn about new shows that they might be interested in, and to spread information. I found that while I was on Facebook since, call it 2006, when I was in high school, and it started like a fun way to keep in touch with your friends, it started to eat away at my time in ways that I couldn't handle or wasn't even aware of. And it wasn't until I started to use the screen time app on the iPhone that I started to realize how much time I was spending checking my social media feeds, whether that be Twitter or Instagram, Facebook, and even the news for that matter. So this pandemic has actually been an interesting opportunity to step away from the technology that has been such a big part of my career. And has allowed me a lot of room to focus on the projects that matter to me and actually see them through.
Sébastien, you've told me your father, John, was born in Germany. Shella, I believe you were born in Kingston, Jamaica. And your cultural heritage, which is of two very different countries, at a certain time would have been viewed a certain way. And now we're living in today, in 2020, in Toronto, Canada. Do you feel that the view has changed a lot about a multicultural heritage?
I would say definitely. I feel very, very comfortable living in this city. I find Toronto extremely unbiased, very accepting, but that's just my point of view. I probably don't see things that I should see, but I've never felt challenged by anything living here.
And would you say John shares that feeling as well?
Yes, definitely.
And do you perceive this differently, Sébastien?
It's a good question. I mean, I don't know what it was like to come to Canada, in the 70s, right?
Yes.
We have a joke. I try to never date my mother. Like when I was growing up, the running joke was that my mom was like 30 always, forever. So every birthday was like her 31st birthday. So I'm sorry to slightly date you, Mama, but yeah, when she came to Canada in the 70s, I just don't know what Toronto was like then. I saw a lot of photographs of her and her friends and a lot of the people who are still our friends, and saw this very multicultural group of people, multi-denominational, as well as of many different sexual preferences, Bohemian in one way, but also very professional and trying to make their place in the Toronto scene. Today, I feel like that's somewhat still the case. I've always been encouraged to share information about my cultural heritage. I've always been interested in my own cultural heritage. To some extent, though, I will admit that it became obvious early on that in order for me to fit in, I had to act in certain ways, which one might call Eurocentric or more Western, or speak in certain ways that might make me seem like less of a threat. And so over time, I've started to come to know that, especially in the last number of months, that while we are very, very accepting in this country and in Toronto especially, there is a lot of internalized bias between what is Eurocentric and acceptable and what is the other, and maybe something that people of color don't want to show for fear of being judged.
Go ahead, Shella, if you have something to add.
In the 70s, I went to Ontario College of Art, an extreme bohemian place. We are very accepting art colleges forever. OC was a very good place for me to be. A lot of exploratory work, but not so much the issue of color or race. It's more about art students taking freedom of an art college. So it really worked for me very well.
When I was pestering Sébastien about stories from my Boom X show, he once told me that when he was growing up, his mom, Shella, a black woman, tended not to view things through the lens of race, and they actually rarely spoke about it. However, this conversation took place in 2020, not long after the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent global protests around issues of police brutality and systemic racism. I wondered if recent events might have changed the tone of family conversations and if they now talk about race more often.
Yeah, I think we do. We try to explore, but we don't beat it to death. So caught in it that we can't appreciate it and enjoy our family dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a lot of work to be done, but that work isn't necessarily supposed to fall on the shoulders of people of color. It's been nice to be able to still, be a family who happens to be black or be multiracial and still enjoy and talk about the things that we love, while also checking in about how we feel about news that's come up.
Yes, correct.
In the work that people like me, I'm a white man of privilege. I have grown up a little bit clueless about such things, and these issues are forcing me to do the work, and I'm very grateful to have listened and learned so much in the last 6 months. Just learning about James Baldwin a little further, digging into the names that we know more of, Martin Luther King, and I didn't quite realize how the ultimate view of Dr. King was essentially to talk less about racism.
And more about peaceful solutions. That was really his main mantra, peaceful solutions.
And do you have a way to find peace? You mentioned family dynamics are peaceful, but in a world that is so polarized, so angry, and so full of outrage, often for very good reason, but what it does not do is bring any sense of peace and calm and a sense of loving kindness or compassion, which I truly feel makes us feel well in ourselves. How do you two find that in your own lives, in your own way?
So we have a family cabin on a little island in Honey Harbor, which is a very, very special place in our lives. The peace that we find up there comes from nature. And nature seems to be a great teacher of harmony and balance. And to me, a lot of the problems that we have in the world right now are due to things that seem, frankly, unnatural. Things like rapacious greed and propaganda-driven tribalism, absolutism. And so I think when we go up to this place that, is very natural, we hear, the sound of the wind going through the oak trees, and we look out at the water and we see the ripples on the waves and watch the sunset together on the rock, and touch the lichen with our hands, and cook on the barbecue outside with no social media or anything around us. I think that brings us a certain sense of peace and harmony that is hard to find in the news cycle.
Right.
Yes, we're also able to listen to the frogs at night, the birds in the day, and just very nice balance of life up there. Nature and life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Landscape and soundscape.
Is music part of your collective soundscape?
Not up there.
I was just going to say, last time on the way up, we actually played some, we played this this karaoke in the car. And we played I Don't Want to Wait in Vain by Bob Marley. And we were all just howling along to it. It was really fun.
Wow. And okay, what music would you absolutely not play because it would cause a fight?
We don't have such a thing. We should get that going. A fight music. Don't have that.
Now, you sound so damn peaceful, and that little cabin in, what was it called, Honey Harbor? You couldn't write that in more peacefully. I want to fight here. I want some conflict. Come on.
What would that be?
What's our fighting music? I usually find that like the news starts to grow a lot. Like growing up, there's always been CBC playing in the background, and so like the news comes on all the time. So CBC's.
You woke up to that and went to bed. CBC.
That's right. Yeah. In the morning and at night, and my mom would listen to the Blue Jays game all the time on the radio. So I feel like a lot of the talk stations, that's like the backdrop to any sort of arguments or frustrations or things like that. Music is the good times. Yes. You remember you guys got the Crying Game soundtrack?
Yes, that was a beautiful movie, and we played that forever. Wonderful song.
Yeah.
And the movie was a beautiful movie. Awesome.
And Momo, who's your favorite singer?
Leonard Cohen, actually.
What about
Katie Lang?
There we go.
Katie Lang. She does everything beautifully.
Including Leonard Cohen.
Katie Lang, yes.
That's right.
She was one of my favorite all time.
Mm-hmm.
Cheers.
Well, Katie Lang, Leonard Cohen, you're checking all the good Canadian boxes. I heard, Shella, that you smoked a joint with Bob Marley. Tell me about that.
Let's not get that on tape.
Oh, come on. We can handle it. It's 2020. Let's tell this story.
I have wonderful memory of a very large, very wet joint. So large, much larger than my mouth could take, but I took a puff of it. Because it was there. Bob Marley was the end of it, of course.
Where was that? You said that was at a party?
Yes, Kingston.
In Kingston.
No furniture, just side floor. I was sitting in, basically, rocking to Marley. And
was he playing his own music?
No. Music was playing.
Oh, okay.
He was not working. He was relaxing.
He wasn't working. He was relaxing.
Well, in the effort of, again, full disclosure, that moment was so good that it's actually in my play. So thousands of people have seen it.
Make sure the joint is very large and very wet. The end of it very wet.
With that story of a large, wet joint shared with Bob Marley, I steered the conversation to more of Shella and John's excellent adventures. Sébastien had shared with me that his baby boomer parents were experience seekers, traveling a ton in the 1970s. I wondered how his own birth story fit into the bigger Bohemian picture.
Do you know that we lived in Paris?
No, I didn't.
Okay, I got pregnant in Paris with him. Paris, à Paris, we said to him all the time. Made in Paris, of course. We were living there for 2 years. I got pregnant, decided to return to Toronto. I was in Taipei, and I went to saw a doctor there who says to me, "Oh, the rabbit is dead." It means I'm pregnant. In Taipei with him. Shock, shock, shock. John was in Paris, and so I returned to Paris and then Toronto. It was easier to give birth to him in Toronto than in Europe. Anyway.
So conceived, is that where your romanticism comes from, Sebastian?
That's exactly it.
Must be.
Sebastian, do you feel nostalgia for the past? I know you're still young, relatively speaking. If there were a time or a place in history that you'd like to bounce back to, where would it be? When would it be?
I am a very nostalgic person. I've come to understand. I think it's because I've been surrounded by so much history growing up. We have a lot of like furniture from my grandparents and from family members, and I think that with the onslaught of consumerism, I've made it a bit of a personal goal to buy things that either I can make a really solid story with in my life, or to only wear and use things that are from my family's history. So for that reason, I get really excited about, what's the story of this couch, or what's the story of this necklace, and then keeping that close to me. So yeah, I love nostalgia for those reasons. If there's a time, I love the idea of going back to any time period that's not our own, and getting to know how people were living back then, because they're using the same hardware, like in terms of their brains and their bodies, that we are. So I love the idea of going first, I guess, to the 70s, just because of soul music and the explosion of blackness that seemed to just really imprint itself on everybody's psyche. And I'm very interested in World War II, partially because of my father's side. I just think it would be interesting to go back to a time when people were united in an international struggle. And as horrific as the war was, it would be interesting to experience what that was like, especially now considering the international struggle that we're all going through, which is climate change.
Right. You made me think of the start of Boom is the end of the World War II and the bombing of Hiroshima. And it starts with the story of my father, who is from Austria. Like most kids growing up during the war, had to be part of Hitler Youth, and who ended up leaving Europe to start a new life in North America, like so many people. He was not a baby boomer. Shella, I would guess that you're a baby boomer, but would you identify as a baby boomer?
I would say yes. My one sadness is that we didn't really take better care of the world and didn't create so much garbage, as in real garbage, in the seas, the fishes. I find this very, very sad how we've handled that aspect of our world for kids and grandchildren. The lack of care, and there were garbage we threw everywhere, single use, everything. It was so sad.
From what I know about the 1960s, I was born in 1970, but the book Silent Spring came out. It was the birth of Earth Day. Did this movement feel an impact on you, and hence you feel that you didn't quite live up to it as a generation?
Absolutely. I look now and I think we should have done better, much better. I mean, that's my big regret. We didn't address those issues. So I'd like to go back at that time and maybe readdress some things, but I can't, of course.
Sebastian, do you call yourself a millennial?
I definitely am a millennial, yeah. fall squarely in that. I know that millennials sometimes have like different levels of millennial. There's like old millennial and like millennials who are just on the edge of like, you know, Gen Z.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty squarely a millennial. I was born without the internet, but got the internet halfway through my childhood.
Yes.
And you did not grow up with much cable TV, and you were not raised by television the way many Gen Xers were.
He called himself the underprivileged child. He still likes to use that term.
I don't.
Oh, I have to add, Shella, that there's another story, another whiny, complainy story where you didn't get him the video game he wanted.
So I really wanted a PlayStation 3, and my parents basically said no, and that's that it is what it is. But then I went off one weekend, and for the one and only time, I tried a hallucinogenic drug at this rave in Kensington Market. And then I came home very, very early in the morning. I was very, very tired. It had been a terrible night. I'd been crying, thinking about my grades and things like that. And I get home and my parents are there and they've got this really funny look on their face. And they're like, "Welcome, Sebastian." I'm like, "I'm really tired. Can I just go upstairs?" And like, "Yeah, of course." And they're like, I'm walking up the stairs and they sort of like come to the bottom of the stairs and they're looking at me. And I'm like, wow, they're really looking at me. And then I look at the top of the stairs and there is a PlayStation 3 box. And I wasn't sure if I was hallucinating, Rick. And I walk up to it and I look back at them almost in slow motion and they're like giving me the thumbs up. And I look back at this box and I open it up and there's a card and the card says, "Happy April Fools." And there's no PlayStation inside.
You're kidding me.
I'm not kidding you. I look back at them.
Kidding.
They're laughing. I ended up passing out on my bed and waking up in the afternoon. But
it would have been better had that been a hallucinogenic trip.
Yeah, but I think for my birthday, eventually, you guys were very, very kind and hooked me up with the PlayStation.
That's another story that made it into my show. This kind of intergenerational storytelling, both on stage and here online, is trying to foster what I call historical empathy, seeing yourself through the stories of past generations and finding a common humanity instead of the obvious differences. I've had the privilege of playing my own parents, stepping into their stories, trying to feel what they felt, understanding history through their own lived experience. I asked Sébastien and Shella if they were more interested in personal history or the kind of geopolitical history you learn about in school.
I'm interested in the way that one affects the other and how there are traces of one and the other. So, for instance, I find it interesting learning about the Windrush generation, which is the generation of Jamaican and Caribbean immigrants who left Jamaica in, call it, the 40s and 50s and early 60s. And headed for Great Britain. And so a lot of Jamaican immigrants that live in London and across the UK are from that generation. And after spending a little bit of time and talking to my mom and thinking about family history, I realized that my mom's parents are part of the Windrush generation of Jamaicans who went over to the UK. I guess that would have been in the very early 50s.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I'm interested in the movement of people, but I'm also really interested in how those big stories are felt by regular people. I never really got to know those grandparents. I met my grandfather once, and I think when I was a baby. But they had moved to Great Britain, and so their story just really took a different turn than my mom's story, because she stayed in Jamaica as a baby.
Yes.
Shella, are you more drawn to personal stories when you listen to, say, the CBC? Are you drawn to the bigger picture stories or the human stories that connect all of them?
Again, if I can do a combination, both I find it works best because you can't exclude or include either, I find, for us as a family or humanity.
I fully agree. I think that's a great way to put it. It's the best thing for humanity. And nowadays, I feel that we have lost a sense of trust that we had in so many of our institutions that hold us together. And there was a story that Sébastien told me, and I know this one is true. It was about hitchhiking, which in a way is the ultimate expression of trust. You must have some amazing stories about that, and also a feeling that it's too bad we can't really hitchhike anymore.
I had some amazing good times. I remember a German picking me up in a beautiful BMW, the most beautiful car I see at the time. He handed me a knife to protect myself, he said, when he dropped me off.
Wow.
And I remember another very nice German gentleman picked me up and basically wine and dined me at a restaurant for the evening. I hitchhiked across Europe all by myself in heels.
In heels. Sebastian, do you wish you could hitchhike?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, hitchhike in heels, that would have been amazing. I actually, when I was a kid and I heard all those stories about hitchhiking, I looked forward to the day when I would get to do that. So when I was in my late teens, I just hoped that this would come, but it was obvious that those times were long past, that there was a danger to it.
Yes. In 1975, we drove from Toronto to Panama and back and picked up hitchhikers, really most fascinating people. So it was something that's sadly missed among humans. The lack of trust, I guess, is why it disappeared.
Well, my generation had something called couch surfing. Couch surfing is this great way to meet up with people in other countries and crash on their couch and get to know a little bit about local culture. So when I was in Italy with a past partner, and we showed up in, I think it was San Gimignano, and this gentleman picked us up, brought us back to his place. We got to put our stuff there. He took us for a drive around the city, told us his family history, showed us these beautiful lookout points, and then let us, go explore. And then we came back to his place, slept over the night, and left the next day. And he actually, drove us to the train station. So I think that still exists to some extent. Yes. It's just maybe changed the platform that it's on.
I think that's a great point you've made, that I came at this with the sense that hitchhiking has disappeared. You brought in a perspective that basically says, no, millennials have just adapted it into their own circumstances. That's something we don't do as much because we have less physical contact with each other. We don't go deep in conversations with each other. And we often bring forward our prejudices, stereotypes, quick judgments. Do you have a sense that your generation is commonly misunderstood? How would you defend your generation?
This might sound funny, but I just don't really feel the need to defend anything. I know that people have leveled criticism about, laziness or not being financially intelligent, for spending too much money on avocado toast, for being a soft generation. I've noticed that every generation calls the next generation the softest generation. Every one of them. I mean, can you imagine growing up in the golden generation, like the ones who fought in World War II, and then having these Bohemian baby boomers running around the place, listening to music and going to music festivals and stuff?
Yeah, basically hippies, who refer to it.
Right. But I think that generations don't understand necessarily what the other generation is going through. And so I think for at least to bring it to millennials, I think it's just a difference in priorities. And I wouldn't try and defend us. I just think that if other generations seek to make fun of our generation, then I think they need to remember what it was like when they were our age and how other generations referred to them.
Shella, do you feel the same thing about baby boomers, and that one could say that they were all hippies, or, baby boomers are all just sitting on their, retirement pension and complaining now?
And complaining about the next generation. I'm sure we did that. And inadvertently it's done by every next generation, as Sebastian said. We tend to think ourselves as tougher, harder, until the next one comes around.
And we always say that the next generation is selfish, that they look at screens too often.
Yeah, I mean, I think the funniest thing is seeing these memes and things go around the internet where somebody would be like, "Oh man, back in the '90s, you had to go to the store and buy the game and put it into the cartridge. You couldn't just download it off the internet." It's like, oh my god, like come on.
As we get older, we sometimes look at kids these days and think how easy they have it compared to the hardships of what we had to go through, like having to flip a cassette from side A to side B. But interestingly, we also have a tendency for nostalgia, where we romanticize the past as being simpler and more humane. Both of these tendencies are natural, but they're not very helpful when dealing with present realities. They distort our lived experience and make us more anxious about what lies ahead. Do you feel hopeful right now for the future?
Very much so. I think we have to stop just about now and look. Really stop and look. And if we can do that, I think I have a lot of hope for the future.
Sébastien, do you feel like you're a storyteller and an artist? I assume that you feel art and stories have a part to play in shaping a hopeful future. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. I think that we also have to be careful about what kind of stories we tell. And what stories we put at the forefront, because as I love this quote, as Peter Brooks says, 2 hours of public time is a terrible thing to waste.
Mm-hmm.
I love Shakespeare with all my heart, and I've put a lot of time and energy into that love of it. But I do sense that there's a lot of room right now for telling very contemporary stories about exactly what's happening right now. And searching for a more plural idea of who storytellers are now. They look like a lot of different kinds of people. They love a lot of different kinds of people. Looking at my whatever personal pain I've had, I think I've been able to evolve myself in some way to make more room for the lives of others. So I think as artists, yeah, Rick, I think that we have a responsibility and an opportunity to hone the stories that we tell, not just for our own enjoyment and interest and sort of self-expression, but also to really be activists and try to make the world a better place.
Well, that's a lovely place to end our conversation and twist it to something that is almost the polar opposite of that message of love, which is competition.
Competition.
Maybe you're a competitive family. Would you describe yourselves as having a competitive streak?
I would say no.
We've had some fun little competitions in the family. We used to play a lot of board games. And my dad and I used to race a lot down the street, like running. Right. And he didn't let me win ever. When I finally beat him, it was when I actually beat him. When I actually beat him. So wow. Yeah, we're not a super competitive family.
No.
And so, in the spirit of not being a competitive family, I'm going to involve you both in a very lighthearted competition. It's the generation gap. Okay, so I'm going to start with Sébastien, and I'm going to ask him a few quick questions. And you have to basically answer them and there's no prize. There's nothing at the end of this other than just a laugh. Okay, you ready, Sébastien?
I'm ready.
Name a 1960s fad dance.
Oh, what's the one where you have the peace sign in front of your eyes and you sort of wipe it left to right?
The Watusi.
That's the Watusi?
I think so.
Anything that they do in Austin Powers. That's
What about a Canadian prime minister from the 70s? He was there the whole time except for a short gap.
Trudeau.
You're going to have to...
He's the father of the current prime
minister. Pierre Elliott Trudeau.
Okay, good.
This is what I mean about us not being a competitive family. She's going to help me the whole time.
Which is totally fine. Name all four Beatles.
Ringo, John, Paul, Ringo, Paul, and I always forget his name. The one with the super long hair. Ringo, John, Paul, and he was the George.
There you go. You did pretty well, Sebastian. That was not bad.
That was pretty bad.
Okay, now we're going to throw this to you, Shella. A few questions for the baby boomer. What does it mean, Shella, if someone is clapping back at you?
It's not a positive thing.
Yeah, you're right. Someone is basically responding very sharply to something you said.
Yes.
Okay. What does an eggplant emoji mean?
Oh, wow.
Oh, Rick. How could you?
It means I see orange.
You see orange.
Eggplant color when I look at you.
You know, that's nice because young people send all these emojis around, Shella. It actually means a penis, which if someone sends you an eggplant emoji, you have to be very suspicious, Shella, okay?
Okay, thanks for that warning. Many thanks.
And the last one.
I'll look out for that. Or maybe I will.
Shella, finish this lyric. It's getting hot in here.
So take off all your clothes.
You got it!
Thanks for teaching my mom about the eggplant emoji, Rick.
It's good. I aim to serve.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
And now's the time when we move from competition to
Cooperation.
I want you to work together to answer this riddle. This is from Stephen King. If you break me, I'll not stop working. If you can touch me, my work is done. If you lose me, you must find me with a ring soon after. What am I?
A ring or
Think of it, dear Chloe. What? If you touch me,
If you touch me, my work is done.
If you touch me, my work is done.
I'll give you a hint.
Yeah.
It's a biological reference. It's in the body.
the heart?
Is it the heart? Oh. If you touch me, my work is done. Oh yeah. If you you say it, remember?
I said the heart.
You've got it. Perfect answer. I love that. You cooperated and you found it. Way to go. So I heard you earlier on talk about karaoke, and I just happened to pull up the Bob Marley Waiting in Vain karaoke. And if you feel like singing, go ahead. And if you don't, you don't have to, but I'm going to play it anyway.
I don't want to wait in vain for your love.
From the very first time.
From the very first time I rest my eyes on you, girl. My heart says follow through.
This has been Xing the Gap. The podcast was edited by me, Rick Miller. Special thanks to my guests, Shella and Sébastien Heins. We recorded in our homes in Toronto due to the restrictions around COVID-19. So please let me know what you think, who you think would be a great guest on this podcast. Contact me at Rick Miller Actor on Twitter or Instagram. My website, rickmiller.ca. You can find me there. And you'll also find links to full episodes, written transcripts, and news about all of my shows. For more boom-related stories, check out our oral history project at encyclopediacanada.com/stories. And remember, in polarized times, you have a choice. Build a wall or build a bridge. Build bridges, not walls.
Xing the Gap.